Some nights, you just never forget. For us, that was the night whispers echoed from a haunted house. Welcome to TN Shadow Stories, where we delve into the deepest mysteries and paranormal phenomena no one dares to speak of. The story you're about to hear is undeniable proof of an entity trying to communicate, or perhaps simply trying to drive us away. Brace yourself, because this is the tale of Willow Creek, where the boundary between life and death completely collapsed. My name is Jackson Ford. I'm 29 years old and live in the small town of Lakeview, Oregon. My main job is an audio technician, but what excites me more are things that can't be explained by science, things from the other side. I'm not a professional ghost hunter or a medium. It's just that after a few strange experiences in my youth, I started taking notes, observing, and diving into stories most people shy away from. This obsession doesn't come from idle curiosity, but from a deep desire to understand, to touch the invisible veil separating our world from the mysterious, to find answers to questions that science still struggles with, and perhaps no night remains as vivid in my memory as that one, my first night in Willow Creek. A night that completely changed my perspective on existence, on death, and on the fragile boundaries between reality and nothingness. I remember it clearly. It was a Friday, late June, almost 10 p.m. The sky was strangely clear after an afternoon rain, and the air was humid but carried an indescribable chill. Like a summer night transitioning into autumn, an unusual stillness enveloped Lakeview. I was driving my new Mustang, the dream car I'd picked up just last week, its engine growling powerfully, taking a leisurely drive around the lake. The scent of pine and damp earth after the rain wafted through the car windows, mingling with the new leather smell in the cabin, creating a strange but pleasant combination. I was on my way home, filled with the satisfaction of a man who had just achieved a small milestone in life. When my phone vibrated, the screen showed Reed Hanley. Reed, my best friend since high school. He was the embodiment of stability, an unshakable rock, 6'1", solid with lean muscles, both arms covered in tattoos like maps telling the story of his life. Reed had been the school's football star, living as if nothing in the world could faze him. Even when facing the biggest troubles, Reed always kept a cool head and astonishing composure. But that night, Reed's voice on the phone was completely off. Every word he uttered seemed torn apart by primal fear. He was breathing heavily, ragged wheezes escaping through the line. He stammered, an unmistakable sign of extreme panic, and the first sentence, uttered like a desperate plea, sowed a cold seed of unease in my heart. "Jackson, where are you? Please go to Avery's house now. Something strange is happening." I don't know how to explain it. Reed's voice, usually deep and confident, was now trembling, almost breaking. A cold current ran down my spine. Reed wasn't easily scared. What could have happened to make someone like him lose his composure? Avery was Reed's girlfriend. Her family was on summer vacation in New Mexico, leaving Reed to house sit with their German shepherd, Duke, a large, loyal, and incredibly intelligent dog. I knew the house, an old two-story house at the end of Pine Hollow Road, right on the edge of Willow Creek, about a 20-minute drive from Lakeview. There was nothing particularly special about it. It was just one of hundreds of old American houses with white wooden walls, gray tiled roofs, and a wide porch. It evoked images of peace, of lazy summer afternoons and children's laughter. But that night, when Reed called, an ominous feeling crept into my mind. I felt an irresistible urge, an intuitive pull, that I had to go there, immediately. Less than 10 minutes later, I was speeding down the dark road in my Mustang, headlights tearing through the night. The V8 engine roared, but its roar couldn't drown out the violent pounding in my chest. The feeling of unease grew with every mile as I turned onto Pine Hollow Road. I saw Avery's house illuminated by the moonlight. The porch light was still on, casting a pale yellow glow onto Reed's blue pickup truck parked beside it. I slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to an abrupt halt. And then I saw him. Reed was crouching on the porch, a half-smoked cigarette clutched between his trembling fingers. The small flame at the end of the cigarette flickered like a weak speck of light in the gloomy night. Beside him was Duke. The enormous German shepherd was softly growling, a low rumble, like a warning from deep within his throat. Duke's amber eyes were fixed on the front door, pupils dilated in the dark, as if he was seeing something invisible that we couldn't. Duke's entire body was tense, fur bristling along his spine, an unmistakable sign of extreme fear and vigilance. "What's wrong with you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as I stepped onto the porch. Despite my efforts to appear calm, a wave of cold fear began to seep through my very being. Reed didn't answer immediately. He looked at me, his eyes wide, glazed, and panicked, as if he had just witnessed something horrifying that his mind couldn't yet process. He swallowed hard, his throat constricted, and then stammered, I think there's someone in the house, or something." His voice was a whisper, almost inaudible, but each word was like an arrow piercing my deepest fear. Something. That phrase carried an invisible weight, a hint of things unnameable, things beyond human comprehension. Reed explained that he had been watching TV in the living room, with Duke lying at his feet on the sofa. Everything was normal, a quiet Friday night like any other. Suddenly, a jarring crash echoed from the kitchen, followed by the clatter of shattering glass. He jumped up, rushing in. When he entered, Reed saw a glass, Avery's favorite, with small rose patterns, shattered on the tiled floor. Water pooled across the ceramic tiles. The strange thing was that the glass had been placed on the kitchen counter, at least half a meter away from the edge. It wasn't in a position where it could easily fall. Reed insisted he hadn't touched anything, and Duke had been lying still at his feet on the sofa, not moving. Maybe it was a tremor or something. I tried to remain calm, my voice deliberately rational, though a sense of unease had already begun to gnaw at me. I wanted to find a scientific explanation, a logical reason for this phenomenon, to soothe the fear clawing within. No. Jackson. Reed shook his head frantically, his eyes still wide with terror. It was like it was thrown hard against the wall. I distinctly heard a thump, then a crash. It didn't just fall. His voice hardened, and the certainty in Reed's words sent a shiver down my spine. If it didn't just fall, then who threw it, and why? I glanced around the quiet house. The wind blew softly, rustling the leaves outside. The pale streetlights cast our shadows onto the white wooden walls, making them dance eerily. Everything was too quiet. So quiet that the silence itself began to feel abnormal, a terrifying stillness, as if something was holding its breath, waiting. The whole space seemed to thicken, heavy and suffocating. The light breeze carried the old, musty smell of the house, mixed with a subtle, indescribable scent. like that of night-blooming jasmine, but with a cold, unsettling edge. "Are the doors locked?" I asked, trying to control my breathing. This was the first question anyone would ask in this situation. "Yes, all the doors are locked. I even checked the basement door and the kitchen window," Reed said, his voice a little steadier now, but the tension was still clear on his face. "I checked thoroughly. No one broke in. No one broke in. So what was it?" I motioned for Reed to follow me inside. He reluctantly stood up, his steps heavy as lead. Duke stayed close to Reed's heels, his soft growl unending, his wet nose constantly sniffing the air, stepping inside. A chilling cold swept past us. Even though it was still late June outside, the house had an antique warmth, low wooden ceilings, a lazily rotating ceiling fan, and the creak of floorboards under every step echoing in the silent space. The living room connected to the kitchen through a wide archway, and to the right was the staircase leading to the second floor, where the master bedroom and office were located, on the kitchen floor. Just as Reed had said, was a small puddle of water mixed with sparkling broken glass under the light. I bent down, looking closely. The water spread wide, not following the usual pattern of a falling object. It was as if the glass hadn't just fallen, but had been violently thrown against the opposite wall, then shattered and sprayed water everywhere. Around the puddle, I saw several small scratches on the wooden floor, as if a sharp object had slid across it. A shiver ran down my spine. "Strange," I whispered. My words swallowed by the chilling silence of the house. My mind tried to find an explanation, but there was no logical one. We hastily cleaned up the broken glass, Reed's hands still trembling. Afterwards, we returned to the living room. Duke was still agitated. The dog kept pacing, ears perked, eyes constantly darting around the room. I tried to reassure him, stroking his thick fur. But Duke's gaze remained fixed on the staircase, as if something there was making him extremely vigilant. He whimpered softly, a sound like a warning from a creature more sensitive than us. Around midnight, we were still sitting on the sofa, watching a meaningless action movie that neither of us was paying attention to. No one spoke. Only the insipid dialogue from the screen and Duke's heavy breathing. Reed poured beer. I held the can but didn't drink. The cold liquid in the beer can couldn't dispel the chill spreading through the air. The atmosphere in the house began to change. Hard to describe, but it felt as if the pressure had distinctly dropped. Like when you stand before the eye of an approaching storm. A heavy feeling pressed down on my chest, making each breath more difficult. The scent of night-blooming jasmine wafted again, this time stronger, mixed with a hint of damp earth and something like rusty metal. At 12:36 a.m., I remember it clearly because I had just glanced at my phone's clock when I heard footsteps. No mistaking it, not the creak of wood expanding, not the sound of wind. These were slow, heavy footsteps. From the second floor, Reed looked at me. Our eyes met, and in his, I saw the sheer terror reflected from my own fear. We both froze in place, as if encased in ice in that moment. Duke began to whimper, the whimpering turning into a long, mournful howl, a sound I had never heard from any dog. It wasn't a howl of sadness or loneliness, but a howl of ultimate fear, of an instinct warning of invisible danger. The footsteps sounded again. 1, 2, then silence. The distance between each step was too perfect, too regular to be random. Cold sweat broke out on me, each bead rolling down my temples, My hand tightened around the beer can, nails digging into the flimsy aluminum. My mouth was bitter, as if I had tasted iron. Reed jumped to his feet, his entire body rigid, but he didn't go upstairs. Neither did I. An invisible wall of fear seemed to have erected itself between us and the staircase. No one's up there. Right, I asked, trying to slow my breathing. Each breath punctuated. I sought reassurance, confirmation that it was all just an illusion. Definitely not, Reed replied, his face pale, his lips constantly moving. I've been here all day, just me and Duke. Reed's voice was a mere whisper, as if afraid of waking something. We waited 10 minutes, 20 minutes, no more sounds. The silence returned, but now it was more terrifying than before. The air was still the same, thick, gloomy, suffocatingly heavy. Reed suggested turning on all the lights. We did, upstairs, downstairs, the hallway, the bedrooms. Every corner of the house was illuminated by a pale yellow light. We checked every room, every closet, under every bed. Not a soul, not a trace. No windows were open. Nothing was disturbed. Everything was exactly as it had been before the footsteps sounded. Maybe it's the wood expanding, I said, my voice sounding weak, as if trying to reassure myself, clinging to a final logical explanation. Wood expanding can walk, Reed replied softly, a twisted smile appearing on his face, a smile devoid of humor, merely a reflection of horror and helplessness. We didn't go to bed that night. We both sat in the living room, eyes fixed on the staircase, as if it would tell us something. Duke lay at my feet, panting, his body trembling intermittently. His eyes remained fixed on the staircase, sometimes whimpering softly, as if communicating with something invisible outside. A light fog rolled in, rare for this town in summer. The fog crept up from the lake, shrouding the house in a hazy curtain, creating an unsettlingly ghostly scene. The streetlights were swallowed by the fog, leaving only faint halos around the lampposts. Around 4 a.m., we finally drifted off on the sofa, lights still on. Sleep came to me not from peace, but from the exhaustion of both body and mind. Even in my restless sleep, I still felt that chilling cold and the invisible presence. I woke up with a stiff neck, my back feeling like it would break after a night spent contorted on the sofa. The clock on the wall showed almost 9 a.m. Weak sunlight filtered through the curtains, but it wasn't enough to dispel the lingering gloom in the air. Reed was sitting at the kitchen table, his eyes bloodshot, stirring his coffee without drinking it. Duke lay beside him, eyes half closed but ears still perked, as if he was still listening to something we couldn't hear. I didn't dream it. Did I asked, my voice hoarse. Reed shook his head. I wish I did. We were silent for a long time. The silence was heavy, laden with the terrifying events of the previous night. Every creak of the floor, every bird song outside the window made me jump. The air in the familiar kitchen suddenly felt suffocating, as if something invisible was holding its breath, waiting. Fear had gnawed at every fiber of my being, every cell, leaving me more exhausted than a sleepless night. Finally, I pulled out my phone, opened my notes app, and began to list what had happened last night. Old habit. Whenever I encountered something unusual, I always wrote it down, to verify, to find a pattern, or at least to know I wasn't going insane. Friday, 10:36 p.m., Reed called, reporting strange phenomena. 11:05 p.m. arrived. Glass broke for no reason. A sudden event. No signs of tremors or physical impact. Glass shattered as if thrown hard. Water sprayed everywhere. Cold sensation began to spread. 12:36 a.m. Heard footsteps upstairs. Clear. Heavy. Slow movement. We checked thoroughly. No one was there. Duke's haunting howl. 104:00 a.m. No sleep. No further direct phenomena. But the atmosphere in the house changed. Air pressure distinctly dropped. Thick and gloomy. Chilling night-blooming jasmine scent appeared. I typed in the last line. Feeling of air pressure change. Unexplainable. And then another line. I typed slower. Each word appearing on the phone screen. As if inscribing an important decision might need equipment to record tonight. I looked up at Reed. I think we need to do something tonight. You mean ghost hunting? He quirked his lips, a twisted smile on his tired face. Half joking, half desperate. He tried to find a touch of humor in this ironic situation. I didn't say hunting, just observing, recording. If it happens again, at least we'll have something concrete. I tried to keep my voice calm, but inside. The excitement of a new investigation had begun to rise, overshadowing the initial fear. It was the desire to see, to touch what science still could not. Reed looked around the familiar kitchen, his eyes scanning the white walls, Avery's decorations, as if trying to find a logical explanation for everything. He shook his head, a gesture of helplessness. Sounds like a prank. But if you stay, I agree, his voice was resolute, carrying a sense of helplessness but also responsibility. I patted his shoulder. I'm going home to get some things. I'll be back tonight, that afternoon. I drove back to my apartment on the north side of Lakeview. The familiar road had never felt so long, each mile stretching the anticipation in the small room where I usually worked. The familiar smell of soldering and electronic components wasn't enough to dispel the heavy atmosphere from Avery's house. I pulled the black case from under my desk. Inside were all the tools I'd used for previous observations. This case, to others, might just be a normal toolbox. But for me, it contained a whole world of mysteries. I took out an old but still functional Sony camcorder, carefully protected in foam. It came with a tripod and a highly sensitive directional microphone. This camcorder had recorded countless long, silent nights, moments invisible to the naked eye, sounds inaudible to the ordinary ear, and most importantly, a high-sensitivity digital audio recorder. I had used it to record audio at the cemetery outside Eugene in 2021, where I believed I had heard a child's whispered voice in the night. That voice, though faint and vague, carried a profound sadness, a sense of abandonment that still haunted me. I also packed flashlights, enough spare batteries for a small army, a few cables, and a brand new notebook. This notebook would be where I recorded new clues, signs, feelings that I might never be able to explain rationally before leaving. I also stopped by the convenience store to buy coffee, a few energy drinks for the long nights ahead, and a bag of ice in case I needed to explain a power outage or simply to keep my mind sharp. These mundane items suddenly became crucial tools for an unimaginable confrontation. I returned to Avery's house around 5 p.m. The sky was overcast. Thick gray clouds covered the west, and a chilling wind blew from the pine forest. Duke barked when he saw me, then snuggled at Reed's feet, as if only near him did he feel a little safer. We quickly ate frozen pizza for dinner. Neither of us was truly in the mood. The dry, tasteless pizza was hastily swallowed amidst extreme tension. The atmosphere in the house, even during the day, was still thick and indescribable. Each time we went upstairs, the temperature seemed to drop a degree or two. Even though the AC system showed no signs of malfunction, it was an unnatural cold, a bone-chilling cold, like a welcome from something invisible. "Where do you think we should set up the cameras?" Reed asked as we began to install the equipment. His voice was low, serious. "The kitchen is best," I replied, the certainty in my voice partly masking my unease. That's where it first happened. "But we should set up another one in the upstairs hallway." Reed frowned, looking puzzled. The hallway leading to Avery's room, but last night no one dared go up there. His voice still held a slight shiver. "So tonight we'll let the camera record for us," I said. As I set up the secondary camera, it will be our eyes when we don't dare to look. By 8 p.m., everything was ready. The main camera was set up in the kitchen, aimed at the shelf where the glass had been. I turned on night vision, checking the battery and memory card thoroughly. The small red LED light on the camera body blinked continuously, indicating it was operating. The audio recorder was hidden under the dining table, an ideal spot to capture sound without being detected. I placed the secondary camera upstairs, right in the corner of the hallway opposite the stairs, pointed directly at Avery's bedroom door. This position would allow it to cover the entire hallway and a portion of the staircase. Where the footsteps had sounded, the lights in the house remained on. We weren't foolish enough to turn them all off to enhance the feeling. There was no joy in provoking something we didn't understand. Our goal was to gather evidence, not to make ourselves prey. 9:15 p.m. Reed turned on the TV, but neither of us focused on the movie playing. The pale blue light from the screen cast shadows on our strained faces. Duke kept lingering around the staircase, occasionally stopping, growling softly, his nose constantly sniffing the air as if trying to catch an invisible scent. His fur was still slightly bristled, a warning sign we had learned to trust. 10:42 p.m. A click echoed from the kitchen, a dry, sharp sound, like the flick of a light switch or the clinking of metal. Both of us jumped. I turned. The camera was still recording, the LED blinking steadily. No shattering sound, no clear movement on the laptop screen displaying the kitchen feed. But Duke whimpered, a frightened yelp, then lunged towards the kitchen. "Don't," I called. But the dog had already sprung forward, teeth bared, aimed at the empty space between the shelf and the sink. Its eyes were fixed on an invisible point, its body rigid like a taut wire. There was nothing there. "Duke, come here," Reed yelled, his voice full of worry. But it was useless. The dog remained in place, growling more fiercely, as if it was confronting an invisible enemy. Suddenly, the dog froze. Its entire body trembled violently, its eyes wide to their extreme, filled with terror. Then it howled, a long, agonizing, mournful howl, a sound that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. Its fur stood completely on end. And then it ran, without hesitation, scurrying under the table, curling into a ball, only soft whimpers remaining. We stood petrified. Not a movement. No other sound but the steady hum of the air conditioner. The silence became more terrifying than ever, a silence heavy with horror. "Did you see anything?" I whispered, trying to force out each word. "No." But Duke did. Reed replied, his voice hoarse, his eyes fixed on the empty space where Duke had just reacted. He didn't need to see to know something horrific had just happened. We backed away, standing side by side, eyes fixed on the dark kitchen. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. A cold gust of wind ran down my spine, not from the air conditioning. It was a bone-chilling cold, the cold of death. The space seemed distorted for a moment, not an image, but a feeling, as if the room had contracted, inhaling and holding its breath, an invisible entity shrinking back, observing us. The scent of night-blooming jasmine wafted again, colder and more pungent. 11:09 p.m., the kitchen light flickered off. No pop, no flicker, just off. The transition from light to darkness was startlingly abrupt and perfect. As if an invisible hand had flipped the switch, I immediately pulled out my phone, turning on the flashlight. Reed did the same, his hand trembling. When the light hit the kitchen, no one was there. Nothing was disturbed. Everything was exactly as it had been, except for the enveloping darkness. But I heard a faint sound, very faint. A whisper. It was like a breath against my ear, a cold waft of air, carrying the smell of damp earth and decay, brushed past my ear. Reed heard it too. I knew because he turned to me, eyes wide, face as pale as a corpse. "I'm not crazy, am I?" he stammered. A flicker of desperation in his eyes. I didn't answer. Instead, I ran straight to check the camera. The LED was still blinking, recording. I breathed a sigh of relief, then retreated with Reed to the living room, turning on all the lights. The house was brightly lit as if it were daytime, but that brightness only highlighted the absence of anything that could explain what we had just witnessed. Duke still refused to come out from under the table, his body trembling ceaselessly, his faint whimpers still audible. We didn't sleep that night. We dared not. Every small sound, every shadow, made us jump. We both sat on the sofa, eyes fixed on the laptop screen, where the camera continued to record images of the empty rooms. All phenomena ceased after 1 a.m., but no one dared to turn off the lights. I silently checked the equipment again. The recorder was still working, so was the camera. I slumped onto the chair, my hands shaking, eyes stinging, my body exhausted. Reed poured us both a glass of whiskey. The warm alcohol spread down my throat, but it wasn't enough to dispel the cold that was enveloping my mind. For the first time, I saw his hand unsteady. The whiskey glass in his hand trembled slightly. "Jackson, if all this is real, then what is it?" he asked, his voice hoarse, full of despair. I shook my head. "I don't know, but it doesn't want us here," he nodded, his gaze blank. "Then we have to stay." I looked up, surprised. "What?" Reed clenched his fist, looking me straight in the eye. His gaze was no longer panic, but steely determination. "I'm not leaving Avery with this thing. If it's here, then we have to face it." I looked at him for a long time, then nodded, in the midst of extreme fear. Something urged me on. The old instinct resurfaced, the desire to understand, the desire to touch the truth beyond human comprehension. I knew this was no longer an ordinary investigation. It was a battle. The next morning, the sun was high, but it couldn't dispel the gloom in our hearts. Reed was still reeling from the sleepless night. He wasn't tech-savvy, So I took all the data from the cameras and audio recorders back to my apartment, staying cooped up in my workspace all afternoon. I closed the door, drew the blinds, creating a separate space where I could focus entirely on deciphering what had happened. The thick smell of coffee in the air, along with the blue light from the computer screen, were my only companions. I started with the audio recording from the kitchen. The click was clear, followed by Duke's growling and terrified howl. Then, I heard it. The whisper. At first, it was very faint, almost indistinguishable from the background noise, but I was all too familiar with this. I turned the volume up to maximum, using professional noise reduction software, eliminating unnecessary layers of sound, and then something echoed that sent chills down my spine. A cold sensation running all the way to my toes. "Get out," only 2 words. Hissed. Not a human voice. Not an animal sound. It was a dry, eerie sound, as if emanating from a throat without lungs. A distorted voice, full of hatred and aggression. It carried no human emotion, just a cold, menacing presence. I replayed the recording 3 times, each time feeling cold sweat prickle at the back of my neck and a shiver crawl across my body. My heart pounded, its rhythm threatening to tear through my chest. There was no mistaking it. This was a message, a warning. The upstairs camera footage was worse. I opened the video recording from the auxiliary camera placed in the upstairs hallway in the first few hours. Nothing was unusual, just the blurry image of the hallway and infrared light. But at 12:53 a.m., right after the kitchen light went out, and Duke howled and ran off, I saw it. A dark shadow flitted across the hallway. It was indistinct, not a person. It was simply a distortion of light and shadow. A dark current with no clear outline, but definitely moving. It moved from the far end of the hallway, near the basement stairs, passing through the opposite wall. I replayed the footage repeatedly, trying to find a logical explanation. Could it be a technical glitch, an insect flying across the lens? But no. Most importantly, it moved against the light, casting no shadow. That was the crucial point. All physical objects cast shadows when light hits them, but this dark shadow did not. It drifted like smoke, completely unaffected by the light from the lamps that were still brightly lit in the house. No camera error, no glitch. Unexplainable. It was an invisible entity, something that did not belong to the material world. I sat there, my heart pounding like a drum, so much so that I could feel every beat in my ears. Outside, dark clouds gathered again, the sky turning a dismal gray, signaling an approaching storm. The cold in my workspace was no longer an illusion. It was real. I knew the second night would not be peaceful. It would be even worse than the first. And I also knew once started, there was no turning back. A part of me wanted to run, to forget everything I had witnessed. But another part, a deeper part, yearned to confront the truth, the mysteries that humans always tried to deny. I had to continue, not just for Reed and Avery, but for myself. I had to find out what was haunting this house, and why, after analyzing the data. I called Reed. My voice was serious, and as I told him about the whispered "get out" and the shadow that cast no shadow, I could feel the chilling silence from the other end of the line. Reed was no longer smirking. He believed me. "So what now?" Reed asked, his voice trembling. "We need to face it," I said, but on our terms, no provoking, but no running either. We decided to spend all of Saturday thoroughly cleaning the house, deliberately removing any source of false noises. We didn't just clean, we checked every nook and cranny, ensuring nothing could accidentally cause a sound. We turned off the AC, the refrigerator, the freezer, unplugged all electronic devices except for my cameras and recorders. We even checked every window and door to ensure they couldn't open or close on their own. The goal was to create a completely silent environment where any unusual sound would be undeniable. We also went shopping for supplies, enough for a few days. Reed decided not to leave, and neither did I. He had informed Avery about what was happening, and she, though frightened, trusted Reed and allowed us to stay to investigate. When we returned to the house around 4 p.m., a chilling sensation greeted us as soon as we stepped through the door. The air was eerily still. The feeling of being watched became more palpable than ever as we entered the kitchen. We immediately realized something was wrong. The silverware drawer was pulled out. It was a heavy wooden drawer, usually very difficult to pull out without force. But now, it was open about 10 centimeters. The silverware inside was still intact, undisturbed. There was no sign of a break-in. All the doors were locked. You closed it before we left. Right, Reed asked, his voice a mere whisper. Absolutely, I replied. I checked everything before we left. A message. Clearly a message. I'm here. I can do anything. We decided to place an additional camera in the hallway leading to the back of the house, where the basement door was. This was the only place where the shadow seemed to have passed through the wall. On the third night, we sat in the living room, lights still blazing. The tension in the air was so thick you could almost touch it. Duke lay at our feet, whimpering softly, his eyes constantly darting towards the stairs. We were mentally prepared for a direct confrontation. Around 11:30 p.m., a sound came from upstairs. This time it wasn't footsteps. It was the creak of a door. As if an old door was slowly opening, the camera upstairs had recorded it. Avery's bedroom door, the room where Lillian Miller was believed to have died, slowly swung open. Then, a chilling wave of cold air poured down the stairs, carrying the strong scent of night-blooming jasmine and damp earth. It was so cold our breath was visible in the air. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, an overwhelming sense of being surrounded. My laptop screen, displaying the image from the camera in the upstairs hallway, began to severely glitch. The image flickered, distorted. Then, a dark shadow became clearer than ever. It was no longer just a blur. It appeared to be a faint, small shape, hovering in the middle of the hallway, right in front of Avery's door. I could feel a surge of cold, angry energy from it. The whisper came again from the audio recorder, this time clearer, though still very faint. I turned on the speaker so Reed could hear too. Don't be here. It's mine. The voice was no longer a hiss. It was a raspy whisper, full of hatred. Reed stiffened. Duke began to howl, a long, mournful, desperate cry. Suddenly, the chandelier in the living room began to swing violently, more forcefully than any night before. The light bulbs flickered continuously, then one by one popped out, plunging the room into dim darkness. I turned on my flashlight, aiming it directly at the stairs. A loud crash echoed from the second floor, as if something heavy had been thrown over. Immediately after, there was the clatter of breaking glass. I checked the upstairs camera. The image was distorted, but I saw a blurry shadow quickly pass the lens. and a table lamp on the nightstand had fallen over. Shattered. It's angry, Reed stammered. His face white. I know, I whispered. It wants us to leave. The feeling of air pressure suddenly increased, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my chest. I felt short of breath, my head spinning. A primal fear enveloped me, making me want to run, to abandon everything. But then, I saw Reed. He was trembling, but his eyes remained fixed on the stairs, unyielding. His courage strengthened me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. We can't run. Reed, we promised to face it. I pulled the digital audio recorder from its hidden spot, holding it in my hand. Lillian, I said, my voice echoing in the eerie silence of the house. We know you're here. We don't want to hurt you. We want to understand what happened to you. Immediately. The anger in the air seemed to lessen slightly. The swaying of the chandelier slowed, then stopped completely. The temperature warmed up a bit, but it was still very cold. We've learned about you, Lillian. I continued, trying to convey empathy with every word. We know you were very lonely. You were left alone. Weren't you? The whisper came again from the recorder. Fainter, but I was sure it was a sob. A deep sadness spread through the air, overriding the previous anger. You're not alone anymore, Lillian, Reed said, his voice deep and gentle. We're here with you. You don't have to suffer alone anymore. Silence returned. This time, it was different from before. No longer a terrifying silence, but a silence of waiting, of listening. I felt a subtle shift in the house's energy, a transition from hostility to something more vulnerable. We sat there, in the dim light of the living room, waiting. Every second that passed was a test of nerves. Around 2 a.m., no further phenomena occurred. The tension gradually subsided, but exhaustion set in. We were both drained. Duke finally crawled out from under the table, snuggled at my feet, whimpering softly before falling asleep when dawn broke. We immediately extracted all the data from the cameras and audio recorders. Reed and I sat opposite each other on the sofa, eyes glued to the laptop screen, the audio recording from the kitchen, the clear click, Duke's howl, and then, when I turned up the volume and filtered out the noise to the maximum, the whisper came again, clearer than last night. Get out of here. It's mine. 6 words, a complete sentence, a terrifying voice, full of hatred. This confirmed that it wasn't a coincidence. It was a conscious entity, trying to communicate, or rather, to drive us away. Upstairs camera. We fast-forwarded to 12:53 a.m. The image was still distorted, but this time, when I adjusted the contrast and brightness, we saw it more clearly. That blurry, dark shadow. It still had no definite shape, but I could see a concentration of dark energy, like a hovering black cloud. Yet it had the size and movement of a child. It moved from the basement stairs, passed through the wall, and stopped in the middle of the hallway, right in front of Avery's bedroom door. The most terrifying thing was that it cast no shadow, regardless of the light from the still-lit bulbs. And then, what horrified us the most on the screen, when the shadow stopped in the hallway. A dresser drawer in Avery's bedroom, which we had definitely closed, slowly pulled out. No hand, no strings. simply the drawer sliding out slowly, as if an invisible force was acting upon it. The drawer only opened partially, then stopped. After that, the table lamp was knocked over, and the sound of breaking glass echoed. I felt a chill run down my spine. Reed clenched his fist, his face pale. That's it," Reed whispered. "It did that." "It wants us to know it's here," I said, "and it doesn't want us touching its things." The whispered, "Don't touch my things," from the previous night suddenly made more sense than ever. Lillian was probably trying to protect her belongings, her last mementos. We continued to review the footage. After the crash, the dark shadow quickly glided towards the stairs, then disappeared. The air in the room also calmed down immediately afterwards. This evidence was undeniable. We had images, sounds, and physical phenomena that had occurred right before our eyes. This was no prank, no hallucination due to fatigue. With this concrete evidence, we decided to delve deeper into the history of the house and its former occupants. Reed spent time questioning the oldest neighbors in Willow Creek, those who might have lived there for a long time or heard local lore. I, meanwhile, continued to frequent the local library, searching for any information about the Miller family and Mrs. Eleanor Vance. I found some old papers related to the Miller family's sale of the house after Lillian's death. They sold it to another family after only a few months, for a very low price, almost as if giving it away. This reinforced the hypothesis that they wanted to escape the house as quickly as possible. Despite the financial loss, meanwhile, Reed returned with a few fragmented stories. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Daisy, vaguely remembered that after young Lillian died, people often said the house was haunted. Mrs. Daisy recounted that Lillian's mother, Elara Miller, was a quiet, reserved woman who seemed to have never truly loved her little daughter. There were even rumors that Mrs. Elara often locked Lillian in her room when she cried or when she wanted her privacy. Rumors of locking up a child. This matched what the Ouija board had implied last night. Mother closed door. Another story Reed heard was about Mrs. Eleanor Vance, who had lived in this house from the 1940s to the late 1970s. Mrs. Eleanor was an eccentric, reclusive woman, known for often talking to herself. Some old neighbors even remembered that Mrs. Eleanor frequently complained about strange noises from upstairs, and she often left the lights on all night. Perhaps she had experienced similar things. These fragments of information, though disjointed, painted an increasingly clear picture of a trapped soul, full of anger and loneliness. After compiling all that we had found, we decided to change our strategy. We were no longer just observers. We had to become decipherers. People who could communicate with this entity, if it truly was Lillian. She wasn't an evil spirit, but just a traumatized child. The get out was perhaps a cry of desperation, of a fear of being abandoned again. We need to find a way to communicate with it more directly. I told Reed, we need to let Lillian know that we're not a threat, that we're here to help her. I recalled my experience with EVP recordings at the cemetery. That child's whisper had also been full of sadness. Perhaps young spirits couldn't communicate in conventional ways. Do you think we can do that? Reed asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. We have to try, I replied. We can't leave her here forever. Our plan for the fourth night was meticulously laid out. We wouldn't just record video and audio. We would try to establish a two-way communication channel. I searched through my toolbox for a small device I had built a few years ago. A sweep frequency generator spirit box, a type of radio that rapidly scans through radio frequencies, producing white noise. And sometimes, spirits are believed to be able to use this energy to form words or phrases. I also prepared a few items I thought might attract a child's spirit: an old doll Avery no longer used, a fairy tale book, and a box of crayons before sunset. We cleaned the house again, ensuring everything was silent. We set up the recording devices as before, but this time, we added the spirit box and the toys to the living room, right on the coffee table. Duke seemed to sense the change in the air. He was no longer as frightened, but still alert. He lay curled up on the rug, his eyes following our every move. On the fourth night, we sat in the living room. The space was lit by soft candlelight, creating an atmosphere that was solemn yet hopeful. I turned on the spirit box, its static filling the room. "Lillian," I said, my voice gentle and reassuring. "Are you here?" The static continued. Then, a word brushed through. Very quickly, yes. A little girl's voice. Faint, mixed with the static. Reed and I looked at each other. We had succeeded. "We don't want to hurt you, Lillian," Reed said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We want to help you." Another word echoed, "Help." "Yes, help you." I said, "Do you have anything you want to tell us?" "Lillian," the silence stretched. Then the static became a little clearer, as if energy was concentrating. "Mom locked me." My heart tightened. That confirmed the rumors and what the Ouija board had said. "Why did your mom lock you up?" I asked, my throat feeling dry. "Not good, not wanted. Not good, not wanted. An unwanted child. That pain, that rejection, was evident in every faint word." "Lillian, are you lonely?" Reed asked, his voice filled with empathy. "Very lone. Lie." The voice this time was full of sorrow, like a heavy sigh. "You're not lonely anymore, Lillian," I said. "We're here with you. You don't have to suffer alone anymore." Suddenly, the temperature in the room warmed significantly. The bone-chilling cold was gone. The cold scent of night-blooming jasmine completely disappeared, replaced by a sweet, faint scent like roses. Duke whimpered softly, then stretched, lying down peacefully. No longer showing any signs of fear, I looked over at the toys we had placed on the table. The old doll, which had been still. Now its arm moved slightly, as if waving. It wasn't clear, but enough for us to see. "We know you're here, Lillian," Reed said, tears beginning to stream down his face. "Tell us what you need to be at peace." Silence returned. Then, the voice from the spirit box became a little stronger, but still a child's voice. "Mom, sorry." I felt a jolt run through me. Lillian didn't just need help. She needed forgiveness. And perhaps she also needed to forgive her mother. "Your mom is sorry, Lillian," I said, a tear rolling down my cheek. "Your mom regretted it very much. Your mom loves you." There was no answer, only a feeling of relief, a peace that spread throughout the room. Then, I felt a warm, gentle presence, like a caress on my cheek. It was a very faint presence, but full of love. I saw on the camera screen in the upstairs hallway. That blurry dark shadow appeared for the last time. But this time, it was no longer a dark energy blob. It was a faint, shimmering shape like mist, and it slowly floated upwards, passing through the ceiling, vanishing into nothingness. Complete peace enveloped the house. The next morning, we woke up feeling unusually relieved. Avery's house no longer had that heavy, gloomy atmosphere. It was back to being a normal house, filled with light and warmth. Duke happily ran around the house, wagging his tail incessantly. We reviewed all the audio and video recordings, Lillian's whispers, the broken words, the cries, and even the final sorry from the mother through Mrs. Eliza's voice. All were undeniable proof of a soul that had found peace. Reed and I had been on a terrifying journey, but also a meaningful one. We didn't just help a trapped soul move on. We also learned a lot about pain, forgiveness, and the nature of the supernatural. When Avery returned from New Mexico, Reed told her the whole story, showing her the video and audio recordings. Avery, initially shocked and skeptical, but upon witnessing the change in the house and hearing the story from both Reed and me, she believed. She cried when she heard Lillian's sad story. She decided to keep the doll and the fairy tale book on the coffee table as a way to remember Lillian. For me, Jackson Ford, an ordinary audio technician. The encounter with Lillian completely changed my perspective on life and death. I was no longer just an observer of mysterious things. I had become someone who could connect, could listen, and could bring peace to lost souls. I still continue my work as an audio technician, but every night, a part of me is always ready for mysterious calls, for untold stories. I know. This world holds countless things that cannot be explained by science. Countless souls still searching for liberation. And I, Jackson Ford, will always listen.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Tina Shadow Stories so you don't miss our next chilling tales. See you in the next video.